did one of these, I think, back in the fall of last year, if I'm not mistaken. And that was fun. And it's great to kind of take these moments just to like have casual chats about fragrance. That's what we all do when we talk to our fragrant friends anyway. So it's nice to do it and record that process. How you doing, Nicola? What's been new in your neck of the woods, and what's been going on fragrantly speaking?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Adam. Yeah, so we're well into spring, even possibly early summer now in Yorkshire, and it's a really I find it quite a frustrating time of year because I cannot get my clothes and or perfume right. I am either too hot or too cold, or I didn't bring a coat, or I brought a coat and now it's, blistering sunshine. Hay fever's in full swing. So until it settles down into summer when my hay fever disappears, and I know it's going to be warmish, it's Yorkshire, so only warmish. I kind of have to ease myself in. And I go through this process of being like a little goblin where I kind of like, have to retreat to the house because it's too cold today. And yeah, and the temperatures have been wild, like down to 1 degree at night at times, and then 18 degrees in the day. So it's been yo-yoing quite a lot. And I think actually that is reflected in some of my perfume choices at the moment, because I do seem to be swinging between a couple of extremes, really. And then, so I've got, a couple of extremes and then one in the middle that I've got for you today. So,
well, I'm really intrigued. I mean, when you tell us something like that, where you're going back and forth in an extreme kind of way, that bubbles up my curiosity. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about. Would you want to start us off with your first choice?
Yeah. So I'm finding I'm really into ambers at the moment. And I know ambers, people may traditionally think of them as being a more autumn-winter type scent, but I've really got into them this spring. And 4,160 Tuesdays they've been sneaking out fragrances. So I spoke to Sarah McCartney about this, and I said, why is it that you don't do like a launch in the same way that a sort of more typical brand would do? And she said, well, I always mean to, but I get so excited about them that they kind of get out before I can get all my ducks in a row to do that. So there's a whole raft of new things coming out from that brand. And one of them is called A Flame in Your Heart. And it is an absolutely gorgeous, spicy, rich amber. But I've been very much enjoying wearing it this spring. I certainly think it'll be heavy in my rotation come autumn, winter as well. But I started wearing it in order to test it. And shameless self-plug, I have written up these and reviewed these fragrances. So there is an article on Fragrantica that you can check out if you want to know a bit more about the new releases from 4,160 Tuesdays. But yeah, Flame in Your Heart is just really, it's rich, it's happy, it's got all those beautiful spices on this really shiny, ambery base. And I just find it to be a really satisfying, very long-lasting and very nicely wearing scent. And this weekend I'm going to a gig that's going to be loud and noisy and smelly, and I'm going to wear it, and I'm sure that people are going to, people who come and greet me and give me a hug are going to be able to smell it. And I really like that about it. It's, as we've talked before, we're both kind of chronic undersprayers, and quite often I wear small amounts of large perfumes because I love the smell of them, but I don't want to, kind of completely suffocate other people. But I feel like for something like a night out, that this is one that you can spray with abandon and just really enjoy the voluptuousness of it. It's a lovely fragrance, and I think Sarah's done a really superb job of it. Is it spring typical? No, probably not. It's much more autumn typical. But rules are meant to be broken anyway, aren't they?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I've been following the progress of her releases, and I'm intrigued by this new slate of them. Yeah, no, it's always sort of a fun day when she releases something else. So
yeah, and they're a very prolific brand, and I on the article I wrote reviewing these scents, one of the commenters was that came in and said that they found it quite intimidating because there is such a large range to choose from, and I can certainly understand that and empathise with that, because where do you start with a brand that's catalogue is just so big? And there's quite a few brands out there that do have a significant number of fragrances in their stable, and it is hard to know where to start. So sometimes I think working around a theme that you find you like, so if you like citruses, then you can work around a theme like that. But one of the great things about 4160 Tuesdays is that if you drop them an email and say, I don't know where to start, they're a very hands-on small business, and they will respond to you and say, well, how about this? So yeah, I think they're worth checking out for sure.
And of course, they do sell those little custom packs, like you said, that they can help you fill out. So that's great.
Yeah. So what about your first pick then, Adam? Are you swinging between extremes, or are you all in springtime green scents? Where are you at the minute?
I guess looking at the selections all at once right now, they all kind of share somewhat of a theme. So I'd say I'm kind of the opposite of you insofar as I'm not swinging between extremes. But let's start off with the first kind of category I've been intrigued by lately, and that's the eau de cologne. But specifically, I'm seeking out things that are surprising to me, because I think that the eau de cologne structure is, say what you want about it, it's very reliable, it's very dependable. It hasn't changed much in the since it was first conceived a couple hundred years ago or more, and it's sort of old reliable in the category of scents that you reach for when it starts to warm up. So that's why I'm really on a bent now to discover eau de cologne style fragrances, or eau de cologne inspired fragrances. Let's say that that really surprised me and sort of go a different way than I expect them to. And one such fragrance is definitely Echoes of Silence from Christele Jacquemin. I just, like you, I also recently reviewed this house's work on the site and had a great time with it. Stellar review, honestly. Stellar marks for Christele Jacquemin. She's only been at it since 2018 in terms of her how long she's been blending. So I look at that and I think, how is it possible for her to make something so well constructed and thoughtful, and enjoyable in her work after only being at it for short few years, and yet she has. So Christele Jacquemin's Echoes of Silence, what is it? It's one of those scents that, when I first sprayed it, my brain just kind of goes like, wait, what? What is this I'm smelling here? And that point happens fairly soon after spraying, when you realize that there's a vegetal quality. Now, we talk about vegetal perfumes, you might think something like a celery note, or like like that kind of carroty quality that iris might have sometimes, and vegetal notes that could be, in that kind of green or earthy category. But this is something entirely different and entirely new, and something I've never smelled before, and it is a note of artichoke. Now, Christele uses many, like a high proportion of natural materials in her work. Some of them are verging on all natural, others are not. So she uses mixed media, naturals and synthetics as well, but I'm not really sure. I didn't get the chance to ask her yet what this artichoke is comprised of, if it's some strange, obscure natural that I've never heard of, or if it's an accord. But whatever it is, it's a wonderful construction of that kind of note, and so thoughtfully and intriguingly positioned in this fragrance. So, you think of eau de colognes and you think of that familiar soapy, clean, like it's like a wall basically of herbs and orange blossom and citruses. Generally speaking, that's the eau de cologne structure. Echoes of Silence, however, it kind of guides us through this like softened lemon and lemon adjacent notes. There's a lemon tree accord listed in the notes. I'm not really sure what that means, because I don't think I've ever seen that before. It could mean woody notes combined with the citrus listed, or it could mean something else. But essentially, lemon tree, some abstract floral notes, and spices. And certainly some herbaceousness thrown in there too, but it all kind of lifts up the note of artichoke. And artichoke is kind of it's a sort of a niche vegetable. I don't think everybody loves it. I think it can kind of go hot and cold for many people. I'm kind of lukewarm on it, if I'm honest, in terms of eating it. But smelling it here is really interesting and really cool. It's like that. It's got textural elements of it too. So, I'm talking about fresh artichoke, the type of artichoke that you have to eat by like scraping the inside of the leaves, so to speak. I don't think they're actually leaves, but scraping inside of it with like the back of your teeth or a spoon or something. It's like that.
Globe artichoke, we call that.
Oh, okay, good to know. Good to know that it has a term. It's that kind of texture of like velvety softness that has, like that earthy kind of taste and smell. That's sort of how it's represented here in this fragrance. And it's mind blowing. I love it. And it's so, interesting. I've never smelled anything quite like it. So I had to mention it here. I did talk about it in the review, on Fragrantica, but I had to mention it here because ever since I got, her sample pack in, I've been coming back to that one a little bit more than any of the others. So had to mention it here.
Yeah. And now, well, firstly, two things. Firstly, I'm salivating because I would really quite like some artichoke with that really nice cheese dip.
That would go well, yeah.
If you could bring me a snack, please head over. And secondly, it occurs to me that you're bang on trend, and Christele is bang on trend too, because I think increasingly one of the things that we've seen maybe for the last 12 months really is that vegetal quality in scents being quite popular and quite trendy, dare I say it. So yeah, I think you clearly got your finger on the pulse there.
So there we go. That's a solid entry, I think. How about what's your next what's your next pick? What have you been wearing lately?
So yeah, I'm going to go with another of my big heavy hitter, more typically autumn fragrances, which is Strangelove Melt My Heart. I think this is one of the more beautiful examples of big, fulsome ouds being used in Western style perfumery. Christophe Laudemiel is the perfumer for it, and the brand describe it as a gourmand, which, yeah, fair enough, it technically is, but it doesn't wear like a gourmand to me. I think typically and traditionally there has been a sort of perception that gourmand fragrances are a little bit sugary, a little bit oversweet, and as a result a little bit childish or a little bit less sophisticated. And I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think Melt My Heart is a really good example of a gourmand fragrance which is none of those things. It's not particularly sweet. It's not. You certainly couldn't accuse this fragrance of being inelegant at all. It's phenomenally expensive, but they do it in tiny little oil vials that you can get, and that it does make the price a little bit more affordable. And I find I need the tiniest bit of this. The little, I can't remember if it's 1.5 mil, the little oil vial, something like that. It's tiny, but I think that will last me for ages because I need such a small amount. It's so powerful. Definitely one you could easily choke out your co-workers with if you were that way inclined. It has an incredibly luxurious and sumptuous quality about it. It's very thick. I wouldn't say that it's rich, because saying it's rich sort of makes it sound stodgy and fatty. When you wear it, it's like being wrapped in a cashmere blanket. It has lots of beautiful elements. There's a kind of chocolatiness, but it's quite bitter, the chocolate. There's obviously a clearly woodiness, but the wood is so deep and resinous. And yeah, kind of, it smells burnished, and it smells old somehow. And the chocolate feels quite almost like powdered, like it's cocoa powder rather than a bar of chocolate. And it's just one of those scents that you put on, you will smell it on yourself all day, and it feels so unlike anything else, and so unlike anything that you would kind of encounter on the high street, that you would encounter in, unless you were a fragrance fan and you were seeking out things that are a little bit more unusual. It's so perfectly balanced. It's so just delightful to have on. It feels like you've really pampered yourself when you put it on. It's like an act of self-care wearing this perfume. And it is the sort of thing that people that are around you will be able to enjoy on you as well, particularly if you don't go too heavy on the trigger. Again, it's something that's, in many respects, it's quite wintry. It suits cold weather. But I've been finding with the slightly warmer temperatures, the diffusiveness of it is really pleasant. I don't think I would wear. I think it is a scent that would stand up to heat actually very well. But for me, I think it would be too much in summer. So this kind of mid-temperature that we're in now works really nicely for it, because it's lifting a little bit more from my skin, but it's not too much, and it's not annoying me or annoying people around me. So that's my next pick. And also, it's nice to see there are brands that have been around for a while, and there seems to be a bit of buzz building about them recently, which is great, because I think it is well deserved. And they've got some really big and strange fragrances in their collection. But yeah, this one is definitely the most approachable out of the collection, the most friendly out of the collection. But also, that saying that does not detract at all from the level of beauty and sumptuousness that it contains. So yeah, it's a good one to try if you're a bit nervous about oud and you want to give it a go, because it does make it. It's still definitely oud, definitely, but it makes it quite friendly at the same time.
And I'm also just, it's delightful to see, you're experimenting with different scents and different weather patterns. It's something that sort of, I don't think we always give the time of day to doing, that we're not always brave enough to try. There are scents that I typically only reserve for the coldest days that, maybe I should try pulling out in these in-between seasons, spring and fall. I mean, I think that they might work better than I assume that they will. And so it's nice to have fragrances that can kind of, go against their expectations like that, and to be brave enough to try that in the first place. So I guess if I have a theme for my picks on this discussion, it's like instances where I'm curious, right? Instances where I'm curious about things that are a little bit different than expected. So the other category that I've been, curious about is florals, particularly florals that do not have any trace of powderiness, right? That quality is typically given to floral accords from things like irones and ionones, which are, by nature, and they're found in nature, powdery in texture. And, there's a beauty to them and how they're used in many different kinds of accords, not just florals. But I was really searching for, florals that aren't glassy and like too thin, but also don't rely on, on powderiness, to kind of, give them the backbone that they need to shine in a composition. So I did find a few, and I wrote about that on the site, but I think one that I wanted to highlight here, and I've been wearing a lot since I wrote about it and since I discovered it to begin with, is Giverny in Bloom from Dawn Spencer Hurwitz. Now, Dawn has a tremendously large catalog of work, and it's really kind of crazy looking at her site, because it's like, oh yeah, you can have one of many, many different fragrances, and for each fragrance you can have like, a 2 milliliter sample, you can have a 10 milliliter sample, you can have a 30 milliliter small bottle, you can have I think a 50 ml bottle is her largest size. You can have all of these in different formats, EDC and EDP and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of crazy to kind of like sample her work in a fun way, but just because she provides everybody so many options. But something I really liked about Giverny and Bloom, we're all familiar with that kind of, like I said before, that glassy spring floral style of perfume that can be very, very green and very, very stemmy and a little thin in terms of its body. And on a really hot day, that's wonderful. The thing I liked about Giverny in Bloom, however, is that it kind of smells like if a Chypre took a vacation, like it just took a day off, like Chypres are sort of known for being, yeah, exactly, yeah. Like Chypres are kind of known for being like kind of austere, serious. You wear those to get business done, kind of thing. Now I love that concept and I love that about them, but this sort of smells like a Chypre just like took a random day off from work and spent the day outside. I love that because I've been spending some days outside too and gardening, etc. So it's been hitting particularly well thematically for me. I don't mean to insinuate that this is a Chypre, and I know that like ultra Chypre fans will like scold me if I list something that doesn't have a ton of like labdanum paired with moss in it. I don't believe this has any labdanum to speak of, if I'm not mistaken, but it does certainly have some mossiness. So we're not far off, and there is something of like a resinous quality to the perfume. So, I'm defending my choice, but this is a representation, Nicola, of 15 florals listed in the notes. That's just buck wild. This is like definitely like this kind of miasmic mix of floralcy. And the cool thing about it is that, you can kind of distinguish the main players in here. It's not like it's not like a muddy mix. It's really distinguished, and it says things at different stages without, being a little too cantankerous. It's not too muddy at all. It's very clear in its intention, and that's kind of a feat in and of itself. But then there's like this quality, like I kind of call it a flowers from the ground up fragrance, insofar as in addition to the floralcy, in addition to all those different kinds of flowers, you also smell some of the leaves and stems, some of that kind of classic greenery, and then some wet earth below them. And the earthiness is it's not dank. It's kind of a clean earth, if that makes any sense. That might sound, idiotic to say out loud, but it's really like, instead of that patchouli earthy thing that's kind of funky and like stale earth, this is like the wateriness that you might find in soil, right? It has like a clean mineralic smell to it, even though there's also like that soily smell underneath too. So it's really well conceived. It has like a kind of Chypre-ish quality to it. So I think people who enjoy classic florals will love it. But the cool thing about it is that because there's like such a lack of powderiness to it, it's very easily wearable in hotter spring and summer days, while also feeling like a cool breeze in and of itself, like feeling like something that you would put on, in the evening on a spring day, after a spring day where, that cooler wind is coming through. And, it's got temperature and texture and like I said, 15 different kinds of flowers listed in the notes, and you can distinguish true to your nose. You can distinguish quite a few of them. So, it's really a stunning blend, and I highly recommend it for those who are even remotely curious about florals.
Mm. So one of the things that occurs to me is that we've probably got viewers and listeners who are male, who are still nervous perhaps about trying a floral dominant perfume. If a gentleman was to approach you and say, look, I'm interested in trying a floral, but I don't know where to start, what florals, I'm talking about specific florals and flowers. Where would you recommend that they sort of focus their search first? What florals are most accessible, or perhaps, found in more masculine leaning fragrances that you think men can pull off most easily?
Sure. I mean, of course, it depends on the person's like tolerance for sweetness and tolerance for open-mindedness in general, right? Because no matter what, I think, if you have somebody who's hesitant about these things but wants to know a little bit more, that initial desire is one thing, and then that openness has to extend to saying, I have something that has a huge rose note on my skin. I have something that has like hyacinth in it on my skin. Um, so they have to be open to that. But barring those like sort of world flipping moments for people who haven't, who have sort of that kind of discomfort you were talking about, I would say rose tends to just it just goes so many directions in fragrance. Like you can have like I think a lot of people who might be coming from that kind of mindset that you just described might assume that rose is like a grandmotherly smell, because I think many people might be used to smelling it in like soaps and, cosmetic products that have that like, that very old fashioned kind of smell. And certainly some powderiness as well, which I think doesn't help. So I would guide them more, these types of folks who have this kind of outlook, I would guide them more towards, rose that has, a pairing with something darker, something a little bit more resinous. Tom Ford has a few of them that are like that. Noir de Noir comes to mind, I think. That was sort of a gateway fragrance for me. I didn't really struggle to want to wear florals, but, I would say that somebody who could do worse than that one. And then I think, flowers that are like jasmine, right? Like they can be pushed in so many different directions. If you're curious about white floral specifically, I think you have to be open towards wanting to discover the different families, right? And wanting to know what's going to get you the result that you want. But I would pair rose and or jasmine with things like spices and mosses and greens and woods. I think you could do a lot worse than that. And I also think that, specifically men who are in that position that you described, they probably have smelled it before and other things that they liked without even realizing it. Because things like rose and jasmine are in so many fragrances, they're in so many products, and materials that contribute to those smells are in so many products, not just fragrances. So I would start there. It's hard to go wrong, and there are so many options that you can choose from, bending those florals in so many different directions, and then branch out from there. Discover if you like resinous, thick, oily flowers. Rose can do that sometimes. Darker florals can do that sometimes. Or if you prefer something that's lighter, airier, glassier, go more towards the white floral and green floral direction.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
I can never just simply answer that kind of question. I like flowers in fragrance quite a bit, so I'm compelled to be as detailed as possible.
Yeah, well, so you should. But I'm interested that my next pick follows a similar pattern to your Journey in Bloom that you just mentioned, in that it's a floral, but it's, instead of it being that expansive list of 15 different florals, this is really, there's more listed, but it is really just one, and it's Gardenia by Isabey. I think of this as being, really quite a simple scent. Whether it is or not, behind the scenes, I don't know, but it comes across as a sort of simple and straightforward quality, and it is that big, fleshy, petally, little bit powdery, white floral, but there's something so sort of happy and joyful about it. Now, the first time I wore this, one of my friends said to me, "It smells like you're wearing something my grandma would have worn," but she didn't mean it that as a kind of criticism or, a kind of, she wasn't saying that I smell like an old lady, like if that is a bad thing, and also if that even exists, and all the, kind of things around that we need to unpick. It was what she was getting at when I questioned her further about it, was there is something a little bit vintagey about it, because it's quite big and it's quite white floral and it's quite diffusive and it's quite sheer. But there's also something quite nostalgic and quite romantic about it. And she equated that with a sort of feeling of coziness, of kind of being with her grandma, and that sort of safety and kind of, bucolic summers that you have when you're a child, and, it feels like your grandparents are going to live forever. And I thought that was actually a really nice sort of inference for her to draw from it, it is at its heart just a gardenia, a creamy white floral. But there's something about it that really speaks of summer, and these white florals that, they do really speak of summer to me. They speak of those kind of relaxed days, heat, huge blooms on trees, that sort of thing. And I'm finding it kind of, I don't know, there's that feeling when you look at old photographs. And after my friend had said that to me, now when I wear it, I feel slightly nostalgic. And I like that about it. It feels like cold cream. When my grandma used to wear cold cream, I don't even really know what it is, but it sort of smells a bit like this because of the creamy aspect. But yeah, it doesn't feel overcomplicated. It doesn't feel like much more than gardenia. And that's all right. That's all right. It is, although it is, predominantly looking at one aspect of white florals, it does it well, and it's satisfying. So I'm enjoying that one quite a lot at the moment.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. I love gardenia as well. So, and that's another, actually, you could do worse than starting off in that area too. I mean, there are many different kinds of gardenia scents, even if the scent of the flower itself is sort of difficult to pin down sometimes. It's funny because my last thing to talk about here is actually a specific floral as well. I started getting curious about hyacinth because my wife and I moved into our house last June. So we missed seeing our yard last spring. And so this spring was our first year, our first spring season in this house. And so we realized that the former owners had wisely planted some interesting perennials, including hyacinth. And, imagine my surprise not knowing that they existed there in the yard, when they just popped right up this year. So it was really cool because, it's not a flower that I had previously had any kind of excuse to discover, and so I was just reminded of myself of the fact that they existed when they sprung out from the earth around our house. And I was like, oh, wow, I'll have to discover what they are like in perfume because they smell great in person. So hyacinth, love it. Had a decent blooming period of a few weeks this year, so it gave me a lot of time to spend with the natural flower and then compare it to the selections that I experimented with. I'll just list them here a little quickly because, they're not necessarily readily available at the moment. And I don't want to send people into a tizzy over it. I think hyacinth itself could be a good place to, set your mind on if you're curious about earthy, gardeny florals instead of the white florals, the roses, the resinous florals. Take a second to give some appreciation to perhaps a less appreciated floral. And the ones that I had a great time with this year, Paco Rabanne's Calandre. Now, you can still buy this one. This is available in different formations, different formulations, and certainly you can find plenty of them from previous years, vintage bottles of it on eBay and all the usual spots. I got mine off of Mercari, so you can certainly find them in many areas. I got this interesting version. It says Eau Calandre, but on our database, I think there's Calandre and Calandre Eau de Cologne. What is this Eau Calandre? I'm not sure, but I know it is a legitimate, that it is a legitimate Paco Rabanne bottle. I have the box and everything, and I've looked up batch codes just to be sure that I got, a real thing. And I did. And so I've been trying to decipher which of the versions it is that I have. Don't have the bottle handy right now. Somebody's borrowing it, but yeah, I love it. Amazing, like not too powdery, not too stuffy, vintage floral that has, certainly a big hit of that, like very specific kind of earthiness that hyacinth brings to compositions. It's not like soil. It's not like patchouli, dank, dark earth. It's more like like a dried out flower stem mixed with like clay almost kind of smell. At least it is in its interpretation here. There's also blue hyacinth from Joe Malone. I think that's the one that's a little harder to track down these days, but I was able to. So, I wish anybody luck trying to do that. But certainly, there's nothing that you can't buy in other fragrances that have the hyacinth note listed. If you could just go to our, database page for hyacinth on Fragrantica, and you'll find things that smell similar to blue hyacinth. It's really just an enjoyable floral for me because it's kind of a cool temperature flower. But it can be pushed in so many different directions, just like rose can. I think it's an underutilized, underappreciated floral note.
Great, yeah, and the Venn diagram of our taste does cross over quite a bit, and hyacinth is something that I really enjoy. There's when you have them in real life, there's a moment at which they smell beautiful, and literally it can be hours later they've gone over, and that gone over smell of them I cannot stand, like to the point where I have to take it out of the room as soon as it's gone. But when they're at their full power, and at the height of their beauty, they are really quite marvelous things. But yeah, I think you're right. Hyacinth is a note that men who are a little bit hesitant about florals could do worse than to start with. It's a strange. It kind of exists somewhere between sort of flower and tuber. It's sort of somewhere in between, and so I think it's not too flowery in some perfumes anyway. It can have that duality that iris can have, I think, sometimes too.
That's a good note of comparison because, orris root that makes up like some iris notes in very expensive perfumery, because orris concrete is very expensive, definitely has an earthy quality, just like the hyacinth does. It's a different kind of earthy note, but it's similar enough. And I think anybody who has a tolerance for any amount of earthiness in a fragrance whatsoever, they'll love experiencing hyacinth if they already like iris and orris root in perfumery.
Yeah. Do you mind if I slip in some honourable mentions?
Absolutely, please do.
So I wanted to talk to you about this really strange perfume. It's called Ohsphalte, as a pun on asphalt, and it's by this brand called OHTOP. So I've been working through some of the samples I picked up at Essence, and this one, it caught my sort of attention at the time, and it's continued. It's a kind of fragrant representation of the city, but it's clearly a city that the perfumer is in love with. It's really beautiful. It comes across to me and on my skin as being quite floral, before it goes into a more asphalty dry down, tarmac if you're from Britain. Really strange perfume. I don't feel like I've fully got my head around it yet. It exists between hard and soft. It exists between, kind of a floralness and bitumen, and it sort of hovers beautifully. Really strange. Not quite wrapped my noggin around it, but really enjoying it. Quite different, quite distinct, quite a standout from anything I've smelled recently. And then there's this one from New Notes, which is called Latte di Cherry. Just the most lovely cherry accord that I've smelled in a long time. And then the cherry melts into a kind of almond milk or coconut milk base, which is just gorgeous. It's so fun and flirty and fruity and light-hearted. It feels like, that kind of joie de vivre of springtime. It's just really nice. Really, I'm really enjoying that, and I've got it on a little blotter. I keep by, I just keep sniffing it and being like, oh yeah, that's really good. And then finally, Tutu by Gritti, an Italian brand that I've recently got to enjoy. And this is grapefruit, blackcurrant, coconut, pink champagne, jasmine, rose, heliotrope, powder, raspberry, vanilla, amber, musk. And it is such a cheerful, frothy, tulle-filled. It's like the you know, those dresses that little girls go to parties in that are just like layers and layers of net, and they're just so fun. This is that, but kind of a little bit more grown up, a little bit more sophisticated. It's a really nice, really easy to wear, optimistic springtime fragrance. It's, you know, it's flowers bursting into bloom. It's happiness. It's being outside a bit more. Super easy to wear, but has that kind of Italian fragrance staying power and ability to cope with warmth and warmer temperatures, and also that kind of classiness that Italian fragrances quite often just seem to build in as part of their DNA. Just a really nice scent. So those are my honourable mentions. Do you have any honourable mentions?
You know, today I would say it's well, it will lead into a future very soon to drop episode of Fragrantica Talks. But I would say I even have the bottle prepared for it for our next recording session. But it's Latrogue Acqua from Arquiste. I would just say my simple answer is anything from Arquiste lately. They've just been hitting really well for me. I have a bottle of their Gardenia fragrance. Speaking of Gardenia, which is just brilliant. I have like a little sample now of something I voted as one of the best releases of last year, in the form of Indigo Smoke. I just think that, you know, the house and I get along marvelously, and Latrogue Acqua, wonderful when I got it and it was still cold outside, even more wonderful now. Warming up, and this has, as the name implies, an aquatic bent on the citrus eau de cologne, with some more so focusing on the floral aspects of eau de colognes. It's just stunning work. We'll talk about it more in an upcoming episode, but I just wanted to give a shout out to the House of Arquiste in general. So it's been lovely hearing about what you're wearing right now, Nicola. I love these like low-key casual chats. I hope that our audience enjoys them too. And we certainly want to hear from them and from you all, anybody who's watching. What have you been wearing lately? What have you been really kind of deep diving on? I feel like a lot of Fragrantica people like to take little strides through certain categories of the fragrance world. So we'd love to hear either the categories or the specific scents that have been, you know, stunning and intriguing to you lately.
Yeah, and I'd like to know as well, do you stick to certain fragrances for certain seasons, or do you mix and match? You know, is it more about your mood that day or your outfit? How do you do it? How do you sort of phase your wears throughout the year? Let us know in the comments.